Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today we're going to be talking about why Swedes are fleeing Sweden. Austrian Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff, convicted for speaking truth, joins me in studio. The premeditated impeachment update, and Trump tells the media. And finally, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
I am America, one voice, united we stand.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk. I'm Debbie Georgatos, and welcome to my first five. Today I'm going to really try to keep the first five to 5 minutes. President Trump made an announcement at the end of September that America is going to be reducing the number of refugees, number of refugees we Americans will admit to America. It's actually going to be under 20,000 starting in the year 2020. This is a drop in number even from the previous year and the year before that. So naturally, there's a lot of reaction from the American left complaining that this number, 20,000, is just far too few refugees for America to be offering. We're one of the wealthiest nations on earth, probably the wealthiest, and why can't we be more generous to refugees? To be really clear, we have 1 million immigrants come to America every year. Not refugees, immigrants, legal immigrants. On top of that, which is an extraordinarily generous number, on top of that, we have been very welcoming to refugees. But one of the things President Trump ran on was being more careful about who comes here as refugees. And I want to talk in the first five today about something that's happening in Sweden, because it really relates to our thinking about refugee policy. In the country of Sweden, which is obviously one of the Scandinavian countries, in the country of Sweden, they had an extremely generous refugee policy, meaning took in many, many refugees. They've only recently begun cutting back on the number of refugees they will permit. They still will permit many, many more than many of their neighbors. They actually got neighboring countries. They got an award from the United Nations for, it was talking about they're one of the greatest examples of a bridging nation, bridging the gap, helping people who are coming from countries where they're war-torn. These aren't really economic refugees. They're pretty much Islamic refugees coming to Sweden and other countries because of war in their homeland. So they were rated exemplary by the UN and got a nice little prize in 2015. But they actually have, in Sweden, they have cities that are now coming forward, people coming forward saying, it's become dangerous. This is unwise. We don't have a refugee policy here that really reflects the needs of the Swedish people. There is very much a central planning mindset in Sweden. Central planning starting in the 1920s, organizing where you live and how you live and providing housing for people who couldn't afford it. So it's a very centrally planned economy and centrally planned country. And within Sweden, the government, of course, went along with the United Nations efforts, desire to have to handle the refugees fleeing violence in Islamic countries. But the story that's out today I want to share as a basis for thinking about what refugee policy should really reflect. In one little town in Sweden, described as a picturesque town of Filipstad, a town, the population of 10,000 people. By the way, Sweden has 10 million people. 10 million people. Over 14% of the people living in Sweden were born in other countries. Over 14%. And of that 14%, 65% of them were born in countries outside of the EU. Basically, they have a very large population in Sweden of people born in Islamic majority countries. So in this town of Filipstad, they had, for example, that in fact the town and the historians are now calling it a population exchange. A population exchange is a trendy word to say that as more Islamic refugees, mostly from Somalia, move into some of the smaller towns in Sweden, so many problems emerge. Crime, tremendous drain on the social welfare system, a confrontation of cultures, a mistreatment of native Swedish people by Islamic refugees who do not approve of the way Western women dress and act. So in this town, between 2012 and 2018, you had 640 native Swedish people, like people born and raised there. 640 Swedish people left, and 963 foreign-born people moved in. So this is just one example, one town. They've also had within Sweden, of course, a history of extremely troublesome rioting and problems of various kinds caused by Islamic refugees for a variety of reasons. People can point to poverty, they can point to not familiarity, not feeling welcomed, but the Islamic population in Sweden does not wish to assimilate. Overall, that is a problem. They don't want to become part of the Western culture of Sweden. They want to bring Islamic culture to Sweden. Very different, very much of a confrontation. And so you've had extreme reports of increased gang violence, assaults, shootings, bombs, car torchings. They had a story on August 31st of this year. A woman, Emma Zetterholm, who chose to leave Malmo, which is one of the major areas that has pretty much a large no-go zone made up of Islamic refugees. She's lived there her whole life. She said, no, she's lived there 18 years. She had to leave because the violence in Malmo emerging from the no-go zones controlled by Islamic refugees was getting closer and closer and closer to her home, her children, her family. She's leaving. They've had extreme problems. They had violence in numerous other places within Sweden coming from the Islamic majority communities. And there's really an uprising toward the government by Swedish people saying, why are you doing this to us? Why are you bringing so many refugees here? No effort to encourage assimilation, no assessment ahead of time. Are these people employable? Do they want to work? Are they looking for jobs? Or are they going to come here and become dependent on Sweden's extremely generous welfare system? So it's the people against the government realizing the problem and trying to say, wait a minute, hold off here on this refugee thing. Last thing, just to give you some context for numbers. Sweden is 10 million people. They just announced recently they're going to cut back the number of refugees they may bring to their country to no more than 110,000 starting next year. Well, if you start to do that math, just think about this. In America, we have 320 million people, roughly. So 1% of 320 million people would be about the size of the city of Philadelphia. So if our government said, we're going to bring essentially 1% population growth, all of refugees to America every year, it would be like bringing the size of the city of Philadelphia to America in the form of refugees year after year after year after year. You can see why the people of Sweden are upset. They want their government to take into consideration the needs of the people, the homogeneity, the connection of the people within Sweden. Sweden has, as many of the Nordic countries have, they have a commonality. They have commonality in appearance, religion, background. Many of them have lived in those countries their whole lives. I am not against immigration. I'm in favor of immigration. I'm in favor of people being able to move freely. And I'm in favor of even the idea, and not objecting, and I don't think the people in Sweden are objecting to the unbelievable influx of refugees based on color. It's not about skin color. It's not about race. It's not about ethnicity. It is about a culture that is coming forward from Islamic majority countries, the refugees coming into Sweden and creating all sorts of problems that the Swedish culture just was not ready to adapt to deal with, to handle. So Sweden may be a good example for us. If you think that you would like America to bring in the size of the city of Philadelphia every year in Islamic refugees from Somalia, then you should probably check out Sweden, this haven that we always hear Bernie Sanders talk about. But really what's happening at the core is a recognition by the people, the citizens, that is way ahead of the recognition the Swedish government has made of what kind of what problems flow from lack of assimilation, lack of understanding on the part of the Islamic refugees of Western culture and of Swedish culture, and the notion that somehow that so far the government is not acting like it's a problem, that the Swedes are moving out of the country as more refugees move in. But they are discovering that they're having trouble with their tax base because the people moving in aren't working, aren't paying taxes. The Swedes moving out are the ones who worked hard their whole lives, pay into the system, and they're not going to stay there anymore if they can see their government doesn't listen to them about the need to bring into consideration in their refugee policy the culture and fabric of the Swedish people. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. As I said before we started, we have a great guest in the studio. She's actually been here before. I looked it up. It was March 28th of this year. She was here actually with another friend of ours. We had two guests on the same show. But Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff is here today. She was here with Katie Hopkins. So first I want to welcome, hello, Elisabeth.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for having me back.
Love having you.
Yeah.
I want to show our listeners your book, and then we're going to talk about it. This is her new book. Okay, which way is the camera going? Okay, this is her new book, and the book is called The Truth is No Defense. And it's an astonishing book. You can see my little stickies sticking out. These are all the pages we have to discuss today. But I want to start with this. When you were on the show before, we talked about the fact that you, an Austrian citizen, were prosecuted by your government for speaking about Islam, factual truths about Islam, in a way that was not permissible. So tell me first, what is the law that you broke? What did they convict you of?
Well, initially, they wanted to get me on hate speech charges.
Hate speech?
Hate speech.
Okay.
Hate speech charges. But when my lawyer played the tapes in court, the judge, it was very clear to the judge that there was absolutely no hate speech, as I knew before. And because there was no hate speech, the judge, at her own discretion, which is permissible in Austria, added another charge, which was the denigration of religious teachings of a legally recognized religion in Austria, which is, in effect, a blasphemy law. However, while this blasphemy law is supposed to cover every religion recognized in Austria, it is only applied to those criticizing Islam.
That was my next question. You took the words out of my mouth. So the law is pretty much applied to people speaking in a way that offends Islam. Even what you're saying is...
It's a perception of insult.
Perception of insult. So what did you say that made that, and we're going to get to why you were doing this and all that, but what did you say that was the basis of being charged?
Well, I spoke for 12 hours in total, so I said a lot. What it came down to was I asked during a discussion that I asked a rhetorical question, which was, we discussed Muhammad's life and behavior, and as you know, and as probably a lot of our viewers know, Muhammad married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9. This is found in the canonical hadith. So this is basically stated fact according to Islamic law. And I asked the question, what do you call this behavior if not pedophilia? Meaning, I know that according to Austrian law, you can't call him a pedophile, which I wouldn't have done anyway. So I was looking for another word. So thus came the rhetorical question.
Okay, so backing up from that, the reason that this came to the attention of the authorities, the reason you were sitting in that trial at that point, you were teaching courses, or I'll let you describe it, teaching courses about Islam. And I know we're going to get back to your life before that and how you came to be so familiar with Islam. But tell our listeners how much you had read, how much you know about Islam.
Well, while I am not a self-described expert on Islam, I leave that to the others and those who disagree with, me being an expert on Islam. But I did do a lot of reading, and I read the Quran, I read the Hadith, but I also
Tell
read
what the Hadith are,
The Hadith
please.
are the sayings and teachings of Muhammad, which are essential for a Muslim to be able to follow his religion, Islam.
Okay, I was going to say Hadith the Quran is, roughly speaking, the parallel of the Bible is the textbook, but Hadith are actually revered, authoritative Islamic texts.
Absolutely, and you cannot, as a Muslim, practice Islam because you get no information on how to pray or what to eat or what to do as a Muslim from the Quran. So Muslims have to turn to the Hadith to be able to practice their religion properly. So this is what I taught. I was asked by the Austrian Freedom Party, because there were so many Muslims already present in Austria and society was changing at the time, to hold seminars to inform those who are interested about Islam, its teachings, and also the effect that Islam has on a free society, a Western society. So that's what I did. And then came, as the seminars became more popular, there was a young journalist who infiltrated the seminars, surreptitiously recorded them, and sent the transcript to the public prosecutor, who then immediately decided to prosecute me for hate speech.
Okay, so I want to. So you were teaching these courses in Austria,
In Vienna.
In Vienna, but prior to that, and the other thing that the reason I really want to talk about this is because your knowledge of Islam did not just come from the fact that you had read the Quran, which most Westerners have not, most Christians have
And they
not.
should.
Yeah, and they have not read the Hadith. So you're speaking from a place of knowledge just because you've read them. So you're sharing with the people of Austria, or who attended your programs, truth and facts about what the Quran Hadith say. But on top of that, and what I really want to get into the heart of this issue is you had early in your life lived in more than one Islamic majority country. So you had a firsthand picture and firsthand knowledge of what impact Islamic teachings have on the creation of a culture. And it's a very broad question. I'm just going to start with, tell us all the Islamic majority countries you lived in and a few stories about what insights you saw as you lived in those countries, what insights you got about how the teachings of Islam shape a culture.
Well, as a diplomat's brat, as I call myself, I was fortunate to live in countries like Iran during the late 1970s, so pre-revolutionary Iran. I then was able to spend Christmas and New Year's in Baghdad in 1982, 83. And then I returned to another Muslim majority country, which is Kuwait, in both 1990 and 1997. And I finished off, because apparently I had not had enough of Islam. In 2000, I moved for a year to Libya. So those are all the different countries. So in addition to experiencing Islam, I experienced Islam both from a Shiite perspective and the majority Sunni perspective. So I really know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I want to jump in. I do want to get to, so I know you have so many stories, and again, they're in this book that you should read. So many stories about life in a culture which is dictated and controlled by Islamic teaching. But your travels were some as a child, because you were a child of a diplomat, but then even as an adult, you chose to go back and work in, I've lost track, you worked in Libya.
Kuwait and Libya.
Kuwait and Libya. So you worked there as an adult. And so, I mean, the reason I want to get at this is when you're trying to talk to your own native country of Austria about what you saw, you're speaking from a place of firsthand knowledge. So I love to have you told me, actually in the car on the way over here, you told me one story. I'd love to just an eye-opening thing about the difference in the culture and mindset created by Islam versus the Western culture of Austria, Europe, and America.
Well, we in the West always think, or are taught, we should accommodate foreigners, those of a foreign religion or a foreign culture. And I beg to disagree on that matter, having lived in all these countries. And the story that I told you on our way over was when I lived in Kuwait in 1997. I was for most of the year at the embassy. I was bored to death, and in order to pass my time wisely, I decided to study. And one of the classes that I took required a paper to be written, which I did, on women's suffrage in Kuwait. And for that, I went out and did interviews with Kuwaiti women from all walks of life, from Bedouin women to normal housewives to business women, some with hijab, some without hijab. And I can tell you that most, if not all of these women, and most astoundingly, the business women told me, I really have no need to vote. My husband does it for me. And now my question to our politicians, both here in the United States and in Europe, is why are we pretending otherwise? Why are we trying to see a different reality when women over there, we always like to call it over there, simply have no use for our Western way of life. Why are we importing these women, importing, quote unquote, these women? Why are we forcing them to live the way we live? I can tell you another story if you want, which would epitomize this.
Okay, I do want that. I also want to say stories you can tell from on the ground, the difference in life. For example, other ones have to do with young girls being married when they off by their dads. I mean, this is permissible in Islam. But go ahead. What's your next story?
Well,
Sure.
The next story is I returned to Kuwait in 1991 after having been a hostage in Kuwait in 1990, which you could actually read in my book. I won't talk about it. But I returned in 1991, found a few friends of mine, and was invited to have lunch with these friends. Very devout Kuwaiti Shia Muslim. I sat on the floor. I squatted on the floor. I was invited, as I said, to lunch, squatted on the floor, sat next to a young girl, very, very sweet girl. And I started talking to her, and I said to her, well, what would you do if you were caught in a building on fire? And would you, in order to save yourself, shed your headscarf and your abaya, your long black cloak? And she said, I would rather die than take off my hijab. And that just, what are we doing forcing these women to take off their hijab? And my conclusion at the time, though I was 19 or 20 years old, so I wouldn't have said it in this way, but my conclusion is we must not force women to take off their hijab. On the other hand, we must tell these women, if you want to come to our countries, you must take off your hijab, or you stay in your Muslim-dominated country where you feel more comfortable. Why are you coming here if you don't like it?
So, but in Austria, the Islamic population, women can wear the hijab anywhere. Is that right?
Yes, although there were moves by the previous government to change this fact. And now girls under the age of 10, primary school, are no longer allowed to wear the hijab in school.
In Austria?
So kindergarten, yes, and up in primary school. So there is a slight change. I don't know how this will be executed, this new law. We will have to see. It's fairly new. But I wish our politicians would listen to people like me. But of course, I'm a right-wing extremist. I'm a racist. I'm an Islamophobe. So what do I say? I mean, I need to be silenced. As you can see from my trouble with the law, they needed to silence me.
Well, I do want to get into your trouble with the law, but one thing I've been reading a lot about this too, have come to realize is that we don't appreciate in America, because we have freedom of religion, which includes to not have any religion at all. We have no sense of what it means to be in a country where religion is the law. There's no line between it. There's no religion says this, but the secular law says this. In the most extreme of Islamic countries, religion is law, and that's so abhorrent to Americans. The idea that any religion could dominate, but that is what happens in Islam. So I can already see where this happens. Whenever you're here, we have so many things to talk about. So I want to jump to, so you were tried in, because I really want to press on this idea of, so there's an extreme difference in Islamic culture and Austrian culture, Western culture. You also mentioned in the book how you noticed in the years you've been traveling, you were in Austria, you were with your family as a child, moving around, and then you're back and forth, and you had a period of time, you came back to Austria, and you noticed that Austria had begun to have a growing Islamic population, and that it was impacting the way you lived, the whole way the country felt. Can you describe that?
Yes, that's very easy for me to describe. Well, the first change I noticed was when I returned on home leave from Kuwait. I was entitled to about a month every year, and coming home, it was usually in April, I noticed a profound change, because there were more women in headscarves in the underground and the buses, on the buses. And this was due to the Muslim Bosnian influx during the Bosnian War. So Austria took in a lot of Bosnian refugees, and this also accelerated Islamization of Austria. most noticeable changes right now after the 2015 quote-unquote Great Migration, which is all the refugees, so-called refugees, coming into Western Europe from Syria and Afghanistan and other countries, was more and more halal supermarkets.
Halal being
Islamic, slaughtered, was actually called permissible in Islam, but it is meant to
following Islamic rules.
According to Islamic rules, and something that we as Christians should not eat because it's not slaughtered in a animal-friendly way, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And we certainly do not want to eat any halal meat. So you have more and more supermarkets that provide only halal-only meat. That's one noticeable change. You have an extremely noticeable change in Austrian schools. The makeup of the student body in these schools. Currently, there are 60% of primary school children who do not speak German at home. 60%. This is just astounding, because if you look at the demographics, we're bound to lose. You see also that these refugees are being spread out in different neighborhoods in Vienna. For instance, I have living next door to me, and remember, Vienna is very cramped. It's not like here in Dallas. Living next door to me, an Iraqi refugee family with 4 young girls, and my next door neighbor is pregnant with the 5th child. Now, I have 1 child. You do the math. It's very clear. The next question is, who are these 4 girls going to marry? If it's Austrian boys, they are going to have to convert to Islam. The boy, who is the boy going to marry? It's going to be an Austrian girl. The girl will have to convert to Islam. Who is my daughter going to marry? Is it going to be a Muslim and she will have to convert? Those are really worrisome, frightening experiences that we're going through right now in Austria. And I'm not talking about the stabbings and the rapes and everything else.
The extreme increase in crime in most of Western European countries stemming from the Islamic population.
Yes.
But I want to get it. So people, the critic would say, the devil's advocate would say, well, you're just, you're Islamophobic because, okay, so suppose they were the majority in Austria. Why does that hurt you? Why can't you let them live their life and you live your life? Why are you so critical?
Well, they can live their life in their own countries. I want to live my life in my country, the way I want to live, and not according to their.
So why is it you think you'd have to live according to what they think? They can be Muslim, you can be...
Well, if it's a Muslim majority, it's very clear that according to democratic rules, they're going to have a say. So democracy is very easy. The majority says, if the majority Muslim population votes, we want to have halal-only restaurants and schools and food and everything, then that's what's going to happen.
Well, I would think your concern about Austria or any country getting to be majority Muslim would be stems from your understanding of what Islam teaches. It is not
that is not what I want. I'm going to explain it even more. Majority Muslim population means you will have underage marriages. It's already happening now. You will have female genital mutilation. It's already happening now. You are going to have the halal food for all, not just for Muslims. We shouldn't have it at all. You're going to see that. You're going to see, well, we are already seeing that, increased violence, because in Muslim majority countries, personal interactions are dealt with in a different way than we deal with each other. Hence the knives. Or the weddings. We have major disruptions with Turkish weddings. They take the weddings to the streets, and they block the highways. Do we want that? No, we don't want that. We want to go to work. You will see a huge strain, and we're already seeing it, on the welfare system. You see the numbers. About 60% of Turkish women do not work in Austria. They're on welfare. Who's paying for those women? We are.
But on top of all that, I have also been studying Islam enough to know the ultimate goal of Islam is to create, at the end of it all, a caliphate, to try to force conversion of every other faith to Islam, to force compliance with Islamic law, Sharia. It is that the religion itself part of its core teachings in the Quran, in the Hadith, what you know about Muhammad's life, the mission is to actually conquer other religions. So I would think ultimately what you're concerned about is not just these little, I mean, they may be big, but incremental steps, but the ultimate is what happens when it's a significant Islamic majority in the country. I think you're going to end up with feeling like there's no longer ability to assert your own, to practice your own faith.
And
you're worried about the jihad.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's going to happen, because if we look at the 1400-year history of Islam worldwide, we have Afghanistan conquered by Islam. It was Buddhist before. We have Iran, which was not a Muslim or Islamic before. It was Zoroastrian and Baha'i. Look at all the other. Look at North Africa. Look at Syria. Look at Turkey. It was Christian, and for most instances, for most cases, except with the exception of Spain, once a society has become Islamized, it's over. There's no going back, and that is what my fear is for Austria and for Europe, that this is not going to end peacefully.
Okay, I'm glad we got that. 'Cause that's the hard thing to say, and it's
Yes.
also the thing that causes. I mean, because until you can get to that realization, it's very easy to characterize what your concerns as a little bit intolerant. But you have to understand the mission of Islam, and once you do understand that mission, you realize every time, every bit of accommodation, every bit of acceptance is just capitulating to this Islamic, this jihadist mindset, this Islamist mindset that says we will convert the world. So here we are in Austria. You're persecuted for speaking.
Not just me alone. There's many cases that followed me, and are currently there's many friends of mine in Germany and elsewhere who are being persecuted, who have to go through the same ordeal, and who are losing.
So
No chance to win this.
So you've ended up in Austria. You have no freedom of speech.
No.
Okay, so you're here in America.
Because I have freedom of speech.
It's one of your missions. So tell us, what do you want Americans to know?
Well, now that I've been silenced in Europe, I've made it my mission even more. You know, it's always been that, but now it's even more to warn Americans, to tell them what it's like in Austria and in elsewhere in Europe, to explain what it's like to exercise prior restraint in Austria, self-censorship, what it's like to tell my daughter every morning before she goes to school, first of all, watch out, take care, and don't say everything you think. Watch out what you're saying. And it breaks my heart as a free speech activist to have to tell my daughter to self-censor. This is awful. And you see, once a society can no longer speak its mind, it's on its way to a dictatorship, to a totalitarian dictatorship. I would even argue that we are in Austria in the midst of a so-called totalitarian democracy, where policy does no longer follow the law, but rather law follows policy, and the laws are made more and more strict. What you can say, the corridor is narrower and narrower, and people in Austria, and we discussed this last night.
I'm going to get to last night. Go ahead.
You want to get to that? I'm not surprised, because I stand by my argument from last night, but go ahead. You wanted to raise the subject.
I do. So last night we had a good feisty discussion with a couple other friends about the question of whether or not, what do you do when you're in Austria? Why do people like you, and you're not the only one, other advocates, other people raising the alarm bell about the Islamization of Europe, the Islamization of the UK, pretty much throw their hands up and say, it's over, we can't fight back, we can't do anything, it's lost and we'll never get it back. And I'm the eternal optimist and fighter, but so I was arguing in this little discussion, you always fight, you always stand up, but what is the reason you say you can't fight back in Austria? What would happen if you did? I mean, persecution for speaking, yes, but I mean, what would they do to you if you spoke up? Do to anyone who spoke up?
Well, it's not a matter of what would they do, what are they doing?
Yep.
And what they're doing, and this is, again, not just Austria, this is all over the European Union, and I'm going to leave aside the former Eastern European countries, because that's where you still have freedom. But in Central and Western Europe, If you look at a case like mine, I lost my job. I lost a lot of friends. Were my husband not a tenured soldier in the army, an officer in the army, we would not be able to support ourselves. Now, why would anybody want to do that? Why would anyone want to speak out if that is the punishment? Apart from you might go to jail, you might have to pay a hefty fine, you're going to lose your job anyway. How are you going to pay the mortgage? How are you going to pay for your groceries? You're not going to get a job. I am not employable. And so are a lot of my friends. So what's the point in speaking out, even if you do see the problem? Second, it's a world of Hunger Games. You have the iPhone, you have your iPad, you have your car, you have your big television, you have your annual trips to Greece or even to Thailand or whatever. Now, why would you want to risk that just for saying something that you know is unpopular?
Okay,
You
well,
don't
so
need concentration camps. We're living in essence in a concentration camps. We have enough food, yes, but we don't have freedom.
Okay, so this is interesting because you're not just talking then about the government, because the government is one big piece of it. The government is saying we will prosecute you, you can't say this or that. You're talking about the culture among the Austrian people has surrendered to this oppressive mindset that says we can't talk about these challenges because they will personally, your friends drop you, your job says sorry, your job is gone. It's been embraced by the culture, the business community.
It's all pervasive. Believe me, it's all pervasive. And again, why would you want to rise up if you are going to lose so much? Why not, these people are saying, I don't care about freedom of speech. I just want to pay my mortgage. I want to have my job. I want to live my life. This is a different mindset. And I describe this in my book too. My parents epitomize this. They are used to the paternalistic government. The government is good, which is the complete opposite of what we know from the U.S. Constitution. We all know that the government is not good to its citizens. We want to control, we want to rein in government. And it's the exact opposite in Europe. And what the government says is inherently good. And now how are you going to fight this? I also describe in the book, having grown up in the United States and studied the Constitution, I love the U.S. Constitution. I want nothing more than to have a U.S. Constitution in Europe, because that would mean freedom. I don't have that in Europe, but we don't, and that's where you see what's happening to us. We are not a free people.
And on that note, Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff, you know what? So your message to America is exercise free speech, because I was telling you, it's not as bad as what you're describing, but you certainly do have in America many of the left-wing forces in this country shutting down speech. If you dare to say anything about, I'm concerned about the large Islamic refugee population in Minnesota because they seem to be taking over.
If you have 10 Antifa thugs charging at you, you're going to have to get 100 from your side and charge at them.
Right.
Not using violence like the Antifa does. But I'm saying you have the numbers, you have the Constitution on your side, and that is enough to protect you. You just have to exercise your rights. You still have them.
To speak up.
We do not have them, so why exercise any rights that we don't have? So that's my point. That's my message to America. You still have the Constitution, the right. You still have your rights. The law is still on your side. You may not win every single case, but you'll win most of them. And you've got to win them and not lose them like we do.
Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff, that was one feisty interview. Thank you so very much for coming in.
Thank
you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, folks, you know what? As always happens when she comes, I can't get to my 17 other stories. Matt, the wonderful producer, is sitting there thinking, is she kidding? No, I don't really have 17 more stories. I'm just going to hit the very, very quickest skim what I want to talk about, and maybe we'll get more to these more next week. I had wanted to talk about the just incredible ongoing battle in Washington. This premeditated impeachment update is what I called it. I'm just going to give you the quick summary. It turns out now that Adam Schiff's assistant, who went over to the Ukraine to, under some study of our relationship with Ukraine and countries in that part of the world, his assistant was funded by an NGO that paid for his trip, the NGO being funded by Burisma, Hunter Biden's company, George Soros, and our own State Department. And Schiff is now having to admit that he kind of fibbed because he said he had no idea the whistleblower complaint was coming, and he's been caught. He more or less said, well, I probably should have been clearer, but actually, yeah, I saw the whole thing ahead of time. So he's behind cooking up this whistleblower's complaint. This matters. Fred Fleiss of the Center for Security Policy, good friend, great guy, he's actually saying, you could call what Schiff did with the whistleblower, you could call that actually kind of collusion, like Schiff is colluding with the whistleblower. It really, really matters that Schiff knew ahead of time. A lot of people very, very concerned about the direction we're headed on that one. And then the last story, because I want to get to my why it matters to you, but there are a lot more of that story I just cannot get to today. But that story, this impeachment, understand again, this impeachment has nothing whatsoever to do with President Trump's conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky. It is just a convenient excuse. More and more information comes out about that, more aware that this is actually just a complete farce. Democrats desperately trying to find some reason to get rid of Trump. I have clips, and I don't know, Matt the Wonderful, if we have those ready, but we have clips I wanted to play today, and they both kind of relate to this last topic, which is basically this idea about Trump and the media. The media is playing a huge role in this, pushing this impeachment. So there's one clip, Matt the Wonderful. I don't even know how to distinguish these. Okay, how about the one that was clip 1? This is a quick clip that you can see this montage of all of these media people just predicting Trump's demise. They can believe how fast it is. He's about to resign tomorrow, according to this montage. I don't know if we have that or not.
Breaking news.
A bombshell.
Today is a turning point. Today was historically bad for President Trump.
Today was a turning point.
A turning point.
We're at a turning point here.
The beginning of the end for the Trump presidency.
We have another bombshell.
Mike Pence might have to assume the office of the presidency.
Rumblings of the word impeachment.
Breaking news.
Another bombshell out of the White House.
I believe this is the beginning of the end.
I do too.
It's really the beginning of the end.
He may be feeling the walls closing in on him.
All the walls closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
Breaking news, a new bombshell.
One astrologer says this means the beginning of the end for President Donald Trump.
Trump will resign.
Trump is going to resign.
Is this the tipping point? I know we've said it over and over.
You think this is a tipping point?
And over and over.
This is a tipping point.
Okay, these people are salivating. These were from 2017, salivating over that they can somehow get rid of President Trump. Understand the media is right in bed with the Democrats, working as hard as they can to drive home the lie to the American people that Trump committed something impeachable simply by having a phone conversation with Zelensky. Last really hilarious story on this point. So you had the Democrats in Congress turn to the State Department. They tried to get the Democrat majority in the House, tried to get the members of the State Department. They asked them to come testify and told them, and don't talk to the lawyers over there. They actually told these people, come talk to us, don't talk to the lawyers. Fortunately, Sanger has prevailed, and the Secretary of State spoke up and said, wait a minute, this is, you can't do that. This is separation of powers. And the really, really, really funny thing, which I'll have to close with before I get to Trump's quick blast, is that when the Democrats in Congress asked the State Department for all the documents they had relating to the Ukraine, Pompeo, God bless that man, Pompeo sent over Ukrainian documents related to Hillary Clinton and her being mixed up with the Ukrainians, and Biden and him being mixed up with the Ukrainians. So the Democrats in Congress got a handful of documents that showing their own party is actually the one who's caused a problem. Final last quick blast, which is President Trump kind of let a reporter have it. There was a reporter just being a complete jerk in a press conference in the White House with Trump sitting there, President of Finland. They're supposed to be asking questions about Trump and Finland. And here we have a quick clip. President Trump kind of lost it in a good way. Here he goes.
Are stone cold crooked, and you know it.
Talking about
Biden.
Biden.
Son walks out with millions of dollars. The kid knows nothing. I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country. and I say in many cases, the corrupt media, because you're corrupt. Much of the media in this country is not just fake, it's corrupt. And you have some very fine people, too. Great journalists, great reporters. But to a large extent, it's corrupt and it's fake.
Okay. The American people who voted for Trump are standing up and clapping at home because finally somebody is saying to the media, who is just in bed with the Democrats trying to destroy President Trump, and this reporter had been, pestiferous, asking the same question over and over about President Trump, and ignoring Trump, said, can you please direct your questions? We have the President of Finland sitting right here, wouldn't do it. So God bless President Trump, and let's turn to why it matters to you. For today's show, why it matters to you. Swedes are fleeing Sweden naturally. Swedish central planners surrendered to pressure from the UN to accept a significant number of Islamic refugees, the third highest number per capita in all the EU, from Somalia, Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, with no apparent consideration about employability, desire to assimilate, or a burden on the welfare system. Idyllic Swedish town of Filipstad, just one example. As more refugees move in, even more native Swedes move out. Crime, high unemployment, rising social welfare costs drive working Swedes out of their own town and many out of their country. Democrats in America want central planning and open borders for our country so we can be like Sweden? Good question. Premeditated impeachment update. Adam Schiff's office talked to, or colluded with, maybe, Ukrainian whistleblower before it was filed. Secretary of State Pompeo exposed the Democrats' attempted snare of State Department employees and responding to the Democrats' document request for Ukraine documents by producing documents showing Hillary's and Biden's Ukraine dealings. These are signs that President Trump's team is standing up against this politically motivated assault, also known as impeachment. Moving to impeach Trump over his call with the Ukrainian president is simply the Russia collusion hoax 2.0. Final thing, Trump confronts the media. I understand that people are complaining that Trump should be more polite to the media. He's so harsh. The media are trying to destroy him. It's important to comprehend that. They want to destroy him. So a man actually standing up for against the people who are trying to destroy him, I'm cheering him on. Trump's plain speaking to and about mainstream media. He called him rude. We cut out that segment. He called him rude, said you're way past fake, all the way to totally corrupt. Strong language, but the mainstream media is carrying the water for the Democrats' impeachment mission. They must be called out. Often not asking questions. All the media is doing is repeating Democrat talking points. The Independent. Oh, there was a poll of independents. I didn't even get to this. A poll of independent voters in America. 69% independent voters are mad and disgusted with the mainstream media, more than mad at the media than they are at Trump. Dems are deadly. Please understand all of my mockery of this impeachment effort. The Dems are deadly serious about impeachment, and the media is right in line, lockstep with them. Their role in pushing the impeachment agenda should be called out. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Love talking with you every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Please email me if you have a question or a thought. americacanwetalk@gmail.com. americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Check out our great website, americacanwetalk.org. You can go to our YouTube page. If you're watching there, I'd love to have you subscribe. It would really be helpful if you subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, please like the page. Please comment. I try to respond. I love talking with you every day about the unique, extraordinary country of America. And I speak about that because America matters. Talk to you next time.
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear